Hello traders, hope everyone is having a good weekend. So I get a lot of questions about, how much money can you make selling puts, or how much money do you need to start with to be able to start selling puts like I do. So I want to talk through that in this video and show you various account sizes as well as using different percentages of your buying power just to give you an idea of how much money you can potentially make. So I put together this spreadsheet showing you how much money you can make if you're doing cash secured puts or if you're using a margin account at various percentages of your buying power. And first I made some assumptions putting this together. For the cash secured puts, I made the assumption that only looking at stocks under $50, because doing cash secured puts means you have to have the full cash in your account to cover the purchase of the stock if you get it put to you. So it's really hard to do stocks over 50 unless you just have a large account. So for these calculations, I used $50 stocks. For the margin accounts, I assumed roughly $800 per contract when calculating the percent buying power used. If you follow my trade alerts, you'll see sometimes I'll put how much margin requirement is for the trade that I'm putting on. And on average, it's around $800 per contract. Sometimes it's $500 or $600. Sometimes it may be $1,000, $1,100, but $800 is pretty much the average of what I get or what I'm required to put up per contract. And then average credit of 40 cents. So, my typical credits are around 50, 55, but by the time I close it out, I'm usually able to capture about roughly 40 cents for each of my trades per contract. So I'm using that kind of as an average credit as well. So if we look at the first one, I have cash secured puts. First of all, I start all of these with 5,000 because 5,000 is the minimum required to sell puts in a margin account. That's set by the broker. That's not my recommendation. It's what the broker recommends that you or requires you to have in your account. It's $5,000 to do a margin account. For cash secured, I believe my broker is maybe $3,000. But again, with $3,000, it's pretty difficult to do cash secured puts with $3,000. So $5,000 is pretty much the minimum I would say to do this strategy. And if you don't have $5,000, don't be discouraged. I mean, there are other ways to be able to mimic selling puts through spreads and iron condors and things like that. And I'll get into that in another video. I do get a lot of questions about why I don't do credit spreads, and I do them on occasion. I like credit spreads, but for me, spreads require me to do a little more research, requires me to be more precise in my entries and exits, and working a full-time job, I don't always have that luxury to do that, and I just feel more comfortable selling puts because I know that if I get in at the wrong time, like I've had a few trades here recently where I get in and then 2 hours later the market drops and it's already near my strike price. Well, I know that I can handle that. I know that I can roll it. I know there's ways that I can adjust it. Whereas with spreads, even though technically you can roll them, it's hard to roll them for a credit normally. So that means you're having to pay to roll them each time. Sometimes it may require you to widen the spread to lower the strikes, which is going to require you to put up more risk. So there's some nuances about spreads that just make them difficult to trade as a sole strategy. Like I said, I like spreads. I use them, but I use them in a very small percentage of my account. And to be honest with you, I've never met a trader who says that they have consistently made profit doing nothing but spreads. Now, you can find somebody who can tell you they've been successful for the last 3 months or 4 months, but I've never met anyone who can say for 2 or 3 years they've been able to consistently generate a profit off just spreads alone. So I think it's, like I said, spreads are great, but it has to be mixed in with other strategies. And in my case, I mix them in with my selling put strategy. But anyway, I'm just throwing that out there that there are ways to do this with a smaller account, and we'll have to just cover that in another video. But this one I'm specifically talking about selling puts, and you at least need a minimum of $5,000 to do this strategy. So the first one, we have cash secured puts. You can see for a $5,000 account, you would only be able to put on one trade for one contract, and you would get your $40 credit. So again, if we're considering stocks that are around $50, you would only be able to sell one contract because you would need the full $5,000 in your account to cover the cost if you had to buy 100 shares of that stock at $50. If you could find a stock that is at $20, then you could obviously do 2 contracts of it because that would only require you to put up $4,000 in that case. But again, just for simplicity's sake, I'm using 50 for all these calculations. So you can see the various account sizes and how much you can make for each on a week, month, yearly, and then your annualized return. So in a cash secured account, you could, based off of this, roughly make about 42% a year. That's a little high because, again, this is assuming you're going to get a credit every single week of $40. And we know that that's not realistic because some weeks you may have to roll your positions for multiple weeks and you won't get much of a credit when you do that. So this is kind of a perfect world scenario. I traded a cash secured account for a couple years and I averaged about 30% a year. So that's probably a more realistic number than the 42%. As we move over to the margin accounts, you can see using 20% buying power gives you a little higher return. You can see it allows you to buy, a few more contracts and maybe put on an extra trade or two when you are using margin versus cash secured. And what I highlighted in yellow here is just so we can kind of compare apples to apples. You can see that, to make $800 a week in a cash secured account, you would need a $100,000 account. But if you were going to use a margin account at 20% buying power, you would only need an $80,000 account to get the same results. And then as we jump over to using 40% buying power, you can see that really drops down to where you only need a $40,000 account now to generate $800. So over half of the cash secured account to get the same amount of weekly return. And for these, it's the same scenario. I mean, this is assuming that you're able to get $800 every single week to generate this 104% return. And again, we know that's not realistic. You'll have weeks where you don't get $800, but you'll have weeks where you get more than that. If you remember from my video a few weeks ago, I had a week where I made $4,000. And the only place on here you see $4,000 is here. Under 80% buying power, a $100,000 account. Well, I don't have anywhere close to a $100,000 account, even though I do use my buying power that high sometimes, but my account size is not that big. So it just so happened that that week I was able to get in and out of several trades more than I typically can in a week. So you're going to have weeks that are going to be better than kind of this average, and you'll have weeks obviously that'll be a lot less because of you having to roll trades. And then as we jump, to 60%, you can see that there was not an $800 line here, so I highlighted the $600 line. So 800 would be probably somewhere in between 20 and 40,000. But you can see, the higher the percent buying power you're willing to use, the lower cash you need in your account to generate the same amount of money compared to the other buying power percentages. But the more buying power used, the higher your risk goes up as well. So anytime any strategy you use, no matter what it is, the more money you're able to make means that there's higher risk associated with that. For most people, I recommend starting out to stay in this range up here, depending on your risk tolerance, is to not really go over 40 or 50% of your buying power. Me personally, I'm regularly trading in the 60-80% range to push my buying power to generate these higher returns. And my video from 2017, I had a 200% year, and that was partly because I was pushing my buying power really high, and we had a really good year. If we'd have had a crash that year similar to what we had just a couple months ago, I would have lost a good portion of my account, I'm sure. And that's just the risk that I'm willing to take. So hopefully this gives you an idea now, based on your account size, how much you can expect to make each week and then what your annualized return could potentially be. So the next video I want to get into is what's the risk. I'll be making a video on that hopefully tomorrow and start looking at what's the risk at using the various buying power percentages we just looked at. Because I don't want you to look at this and think, oh great, I have a $20,000 account. I'm going to start using 80% of my buying power so I can make $800 a week. And that sounds great, but you also need to understand the risk that comes along with using that much buying power. So the next video, I'm going to get into what those risks are and the potential losses you could have using those higher percentages of buying power. I would appreciate it if you would like and subscribe and be on the lookout for my next video. Thanks.